I confessed to the FBI that my ex-boyfriend was an illegal animal smuggler and a federal grant fraudster. I'm Anya, a successful science communication expert in my 40s, and I travel the world giving lectures. Most people would call me vindictive for what I did 20 years ago, but I just call it directing knowledge to the right places, especially after he tried to break up with me by telling me I was getting fat. That's how this all starts, I guess. Back in the 90s, I was just a college student and he was Ethan, 23. We met and it was like a movie. We were both moving 3,000 miles across the country. It felt like destiny. We were moving so close to each other, just 90 minutes apart. Everything seemed easy. He was already into his PhD in animal science, always around those breeding cages and tanks. Even then, he had this air about him, like the rules didn't apply. I remember him mentioning some $25 federal form for one of his animals, a tiny thing, and he just refused to file it. He said he didn't want the government in his business. It was such a small thing, but it always stuck with me. He just felt like he was above it all. If you're hearing this and feeling that sting of an old hurt, please subscribe. It helps me know people are actually listening. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I want to know how far this story has traveled. It wasn't easy dating him, even with the fate thing. I was working and he was deep in school, so I drove to his place every weekend. His house always smelled like animal bedding and old cheese and crackers. It's a funny memory now. He was renting with two other guys, Owen and Reese. They were great. I got along with his friends and classmates faster than he did. I even got close to Eleanor, his advisor's wife. She worked in admin, a really lovely woman. We'd have lunch together. I had my own life, but I was totally pulled into his world. I saw all those cages and tanks where he kept his business. I didn't know then that I'd be the one tearing them down. 2 years into that life, I was at his house, just laying in bed next to him. It was late. We were undressed. Then he just said it. Out of nowhere. He said he was concerned I was gaining weight and that it made it harder for him to be attracted to me. No mention of my health or anything real. It was just about him. I sat right up. I was 23 and I wasn't going to accept that. I knew I hadn't gained much, maybe 10 pounds. But hearing that felt like a punch. I kept my voice calm though. I wasn't going to fight him. I just asked what he planned to do about it. That's when I saw the coward in his eyes. He had no plan. I didn't yell. I just stared at him. I asked, "So what is your solution to this?" He totally froze up. He just mumbled that I should try to lose weight. I told him straight up, "Nah, I'm not doing that." I wanted to know what he was going to do. He had nothing. He said he just wanted to let me know how he felt. I said, "Cool, thanks." I got dressed, got back in bed, and went to sleep. The problem was his. It wasn't mine. That was that. I drove home the next morning like usual. Looking back, that quiet refusal was the first step. It showed him I wouldn't be controlled, and that must have really scared him. We kept dating for about 3 more months after that weight talk. It was just going nowhere. Then he called me one day to end things. It was almost 3 years total we'd been together. And the reason? Get this, he said, "You don't know enough about science." He actually told me he couldn't have a conversation without using common animal names instead of the science names. I couldn't believe the stupid lie. I told him it was totally bogus and demanded the real reason. He insisted it was true. That was it for a month, but I wasn't letting him get away with it. That excuse was such an insult. I knew he was hiding something big. A month later, Ethan came to my apartment to drop off some of my stuff. I cornered him. I needed the truth. I kept pushing him until he finally broke. He admitted he was seeing Chloe, one of his undergrad students. She was 19. He was 26 and her teacher. I just started screaming at him to leave. My roommate heard me and actually threatened to throw him off the second-floor balcony if he didn't go. He left quick. Once he was gone, my screaming stopped and I just started laughing. It wasn't happy laughter. It was this stunned, shocked laugh. because suddenly everything made sense. That stunned laughter was the moment everything changed. I suddenly saw him for what he was, a total coward. He didn't want to break up with me himself. He wanted me to do the awful job for him. He tried to ruin how I felt about myself just to get out of being honest. It was so transparent. And I thought about how he did it. It was 1 a.m., 95 miles from my home, right after we'd been intimate. What was my supposed move? Storm out and drive an hour and a half? He was pathetic. My rage was gone. Now it was just this cold, calculated amusement. I realized he didn't deserve my anger. He deserved something much cleaner. Something that used his own arrogance against him. That laughter got louder when I remembered Chloe. I'd met her before at one of his BBQs. She spilled something on herself and Ethan asked if I had any sweats to lend her. I couldn't. I was a size 8 then, and she was a size 18. Nothing wrong with her size, not at all. But it was the last piece of the puzzle. He didn't find me unattractive. He just wanted to date her. He actually preferred a bigger woman, but he was too much of a worm to break up with me like an adult. He used my body as a shield. That memory, those pieces clicking into place, completely wiped out the hurt. It made my plan perfectly clear. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposing a liar. My next step was sending an email to Owen and Reese. Remember, this was the early 2000s, so email was how you handled anything serious that wasn't a call. I just wanted them to know we were done, and that I always liked them. They wrote back right away. They confessed they knew about Chloe the whole time. They were actually the ones who pushed Ethan to tell me the truth, which is why he used that ridiculous science excuse. They were sick of his entitled behavior. Owen even offered to help me get my last few things from the house. He suggested I come up that weekend, and we could actually go out and have fun. It was the first time I felt like I had allies inside his fortress. I knew right then I could start digging. I took Owen up on his offer. I was gonna drive up that weekend. It wasn't about picking up a few boxes. It was about seeing the house one last time and finding what I knew was there. Owen was great, saying we could finally go out and drink and have a real good time. All the stuff Ethan never wanted to waste money on. But I had a secret mission. I knew I had to get inside those cages and tanks he kept. I needed a clear look at his operation, especially the ones he was so secretive about. I remembered him bragging about never filling out that tiny federal form. I knew he was cutting corners on the rules. And if he was cheating on me, he was probably cheating the system too. I just needed proof. I showed up that Saturday. Owen let me into the house while Ethan was gone. I could smell the familiar mix of animal bedding and old food. Owen was collecting my books, but I wasn't interested in that. I went straight to the cages and tanks. I took a cheap disposable camera with me. I wasn't a PhD student, but I had paid attention for 3 years. I knew what to look for. Ethan had this one animal, an unreleasable endangered species. He got it from a rescue, but he was supposed to file that paperwork, that $25 form he always skipped. I took the picture. Then I looked at the rest of his tanks. I was searching for the exact evidence that showed he thought he was untouchable. I didn't waste any time. The first important picture was that endangered animal. It was sitting right there in its tank. It was perfectly fine, but Ethan's failure to send in that simple $25 form was proof he was hiding things. He never thought he needed permission from anyone. I took the shot. I made sure to get a picture of the tank setup too. Then I moved on to the rest of his little illegal empire. I saw the other animals in their cages. I made sure to photograph his main breeding operation where the conditions were tight. But then I spotted the real problem. The one thing that would hit him the hardest. There it was. Right next to a window, easy to see from the outside, was a whole other tank. Inside was an animal that you just can't legally have in that state. Not under almost any conditions. This wasn't just skipping a $25 form. This was a real crime. He was so arrogant, he kept it right there where a neighbor could see it. I made sure to get a clear picture of that too. I kept moving. documenting the crowded conditions in his breeding cages. It felt like I was collecting keys to unlock all the rules he'd broken. My anger was totally gone. It was just this quiet focus. I had the physical proof I needed. I closed up the camera, and it was time to move on to the next part of the plan. I took a lot of pictures of the crowding. His breeding cages were too small for the number of animals he was trying to sell. He was running a business out of that house, but he was cutting every possible corner. He treated the rules the same way he treated me, disposable. Once the film was full, I felt this shift. I had the facts. Now came the performance. Owen and I went out that night like we planned. It was great to finally enjoy myself. We came back around midnight. I made sure Ethan and Chloe were watching TV right in the living room. I walked in wearing a short dress, pretty drunk, and Owen was practically carrying me. I wanted them to see how little I cared about their little affair. The next morning, I took the pettiest revenge of all. The plan worked perfectly that night. We came in late, loud, and messy. Ethan and Chloe had to look up from the TV and watch us. I made sure to stumble right past them. It felt good, the small, petty win. I spent the night in Owen's room. He was a perfect gentleman, but he made sure to walk past the living room in his boxers a few times. We were making plenty of loud giggling and moaning sounds for them to hear. It was juvenile, I know, but it was fun. It felt like I was already freeing myself from Ethan's control, that little box he put me in. The next morning, though, I knew I had to end the performance and start the real work. Yeah, we made sure they heard everything that night. It wasn't about sex for me. It was just about making noise and laughing at his cowardice. It felt amazing to be so careless in his space. The next morning was the real masterpiece. I came out to the kitchen, still in my short dress, hair all messy. I grabbed a donut and started eating it really slowly. Ethan just stared at me. He had to say something. He finally snapped, saying I didn't have to act like a whore in front of him. Owen was right there. He beamed at me and kissed me on the head. I looked right at Chloe, who looked miserable, and said, "Have fun with my leftovers." I walked out right then. The petty show was over. The real work had to start. I had a roll of film to develop. Ethan's little jab about me acting like a whore didn't land at all. I was just enjoying my donut, still in that rumpled dress with messy hair. Owen kissing my head just drove Ethan crazy. But my line, "Have fun with my leftovers," that was the final word. Chloe looked so ashamed. She couldn't even look me in the eye. That was the end of the small, petty revenge. I didn't care about their feelings anymore. I had my roll of film. I drove straight home and went right to the store to get the pictures developed. This was before digital cameras, remember? It was thrilling. I held the photos of the illegal cages and tanks in my hands. The evidence was real. I knew exactly who to call first to start the real, honest work. The second I had those photos in my hand, I knew what I was doing was right. This wasn't just about Ethan being a bad boyfriend anymore. It was about rules. It was about the law. So I called the State Office of Fish and Wildlife. I told them everything. I reported the crowding in the breeding cages, the failure to file the paperwork for the endangered species, and especially that illegal animal in the tank next to the window. They were serious about it. They told me how to submit my full statement and send the pictures. It felt good to use the evidence. I didn't have to lie about anything. I was just pointing the government toward the liar. That was only the first call, though. I had more calls to make. I had the animal problem handled. But Ethan still thought he was safe at the university. He thought his stupid, you don't know science lie was enough. He was wrong. Owen and Reese were already tired of his arrogant behavior. They knew he was sleeping with Chloe, his student, and they knew it was wrong. I was doing my part with the wildlife officials, but they handled the university side. They made sure to file formal complaints that their teaching assistant roommate was having an inappropriate relationship and showing favoritism. It wasn't a huge program, so everyone found out fast. I didn't have to do the dirty work. His own friends, his own peers, they were tired of him. They were the ones who really wanted to see his entitled house of cards fall down. The federal hammer came down hard, just like I knew it would. Ethan lost his big EPA grant immediately. Worse than that, he had to pay back the $30,000 he had already spent. Think about that. A student suddenly owing that much money. He would never be able to get another federal grant ever again. His career was over before it even started. He managed to avoid jail time for the illegal animals because they were found in good health. But he still had to pay a huge $15,000 fine for the state charges. He lost his whole breeding business too. My evidence, those pictures of the cages and tanks, cost him a fortune. It wasn't revenge. It was just an accounting of all his lies. He thought the fines were the worst of it. He was wrong. The university was still doing their investigation. Thanks to Eleanor and Owen's complaints, they revoked his scholarship. They fired him from teaching because of the inappropriate relationship with Chloe. He couldn't afford to stay in the PhD program after losing the grant money and the scholarship. He somehow avoided being totally expelled. But he had to settle for just getting a master's degree instead of the PhD he always wanted. It always makes me laugh that he was so self-assured. He didn't even wait 4 weeks for Chloe's class to end before dating her publicly. If he had just waited, he would have been fine under university rules. But he was too arrogant. He was too careless. My job was done. After the university mess, I had one last piece of business. I missed his sisters, Samantha and Veronica, and his brother, Finn. They were good people. I emailed them and said I felt weird reaching out, but I told them why Ethan and I broke up, about the weight comment and the cheating. They wrote back saying Ethan had told the whole family that I broke up with him because the distance was too much. Of course he did. He never owned his lies. So I sent them the actual emails he wrote after the breakup. The ones where he talked about falling for Chloe and saying I couldn't keep up with him intellectually. That exposed his lies about my weight and the distance to his whole family. It felt good to clear my name with them. His social circle was completely demolished. Ethan's dad paid for him to finish 1 more year, so he could at least get his master's degree. I was done with him mostly. I stayed friends with his siblings, and Eleanor became like an aunt to me. I went on with my own life. I ended up going back to school too, and I got my own master's. The funny part? My job now is helping scientists and doctors talk about their work with regular people. You know, us dummies who can't remember all the long science names. It's the total opposite of the stupid reason Ethan gave me for breaking up. I swear it wasn't planned, but I love my job. I get to travel a ton, speak a lot, and I learn cool things all the time. He said I wasn't smart enough. Now I get paid to make smart people understandable. The irony isn't lost on me. 2 decades passed, just like that. My career took off, and I kept traveling. I still talk to his sisters and his brother. They'd fill me in on Ethan. He and Chloe did get married and had 2 kids. Chloe dropped out of the sciences and became an accountant. And Ethan? He just went back to breeding animals. The thing he was doing illegally out of his college house is what he was still doing for work 20 years later. He never got that PhD or that big professor job. He was stuck. I was giving lectures at major universities. He was back to the cages and tanks. It was the long game playing itself out. He was exactly where he should have been, thanks to his own choices. It proved that sometimes, just getting the truth to the right people is enough. About 10 years into that 20-year stretch, one of his sisters, Samantha, was getting married. I sent her a wedding gift. Ethan just couldn't stand it. At her bridal shower, he started complaining loudly about how all his siblings were still friends with me and wouldn't really welcome Chloe, his wife. I heard this story later from Samantha. She didn't miss a beat. She just laughed at him and told everyone, "I don't make it a habit to be friends with homewreckers." Just like that. That's actually how his parents finally found out the real story of how we broke up. Not the distance lie, but the cheating and the pathetic body shaming he used as an excuse. Ethan lost control of the narrative completely. He never found out I was the one who called Fish and Wildlife, but his own sister was the one who finally took away his good name in the family. Fast forward another 10 years to just a few weeks ago. I was at a big university. I was the guest lecturer, talking to 250 students. I felt great. After the talk, I was mingling with the students and I heard a voice say, "Hey, Anya, long time no see." My face didn't change at all. I was totally shocked. It was Ethan. I hadn't seen him in 20 years. My first instinct was to totally fake it. I just looked at him and said, "I'm sorry, help me out. Have we met at another lecture?" He looked stunned, like he couldn't believe it was me. He said, "It's me, Ethan." I said, "Oh my goodness, Ethan. I guess I blocked you out." I moved away fast when he tried to hug me. Seeing him there in the audience, while I was the expert on the stage, was all the satisfaction I needed. I was ready to leave it at that. I went out to dinner with the department head and a few faculty who had invited me to speak. We were talking about the day, and one of them suddenly asked, "So you know Ethan?" I kept it vague. I said I knew him from over 20 years ago. Then she told me he was there interviewing for a teaching spot and they were probably going to hire him. I couldn't stop myself. I literally scoffed. When they all looked at me, I apologized, but I said I was just shocked he was teaching after what happened at University X. They asked what happened. I told them simply he was sleeping with a 19-year-old student when he was 26. I said he had to leave the PhD program without his degree because he lost his scholarship. The three of them looked totally serious, realizing they had a major problem. They said they'd have to look into it. I gave the universe one final nudge. I didn't lie. I just directed the truth to the people who needed it most.